There are two realities in Connecticut in 2025. The state government has had multiple years of surpluses and a full rainy day fund, while for towns and cities, costs are soaring and keeping up with demands without overburdening residents seems like an impossible task. Or to quote CCM's executive director Joe DeLong in a recent Hartford Courant article on the topic, the bottom is falling out. So municipalities are asking the governor to do the math and restore parity to local funding. One of the leading voices at this moment is New Haven's very own mayor, Justin Elicker, who spearheaded an op-ed co-signed by 51 other municipal CEOs and brought several dozen students to the state capitol to testify on the need for increased education funding. He joins us today to talk about the reality towns and cities are experiencing and what can be done. The Municipal Voice is the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities podcast in collaboration with WNHH LP 103.5 FM. I'm your host, Matt Ford. As always, be sure to give us a like and let us know what you're thinking in the comments. CCM's Municipal Voice podcast continues to present a key forum on important state local issues. The views expressed do not necessarily reflect the consensus views of CCM or member municipal leaders. Mayor, thanks for joining us today.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Always good to have you on the show. So to start off, and this might be kind of difficult to, simplify, but can you explain for our listeners what the budgeting process is for New Haven and other cities in Connecticut and why the state budget matters in relation to that?
Sure. The budget process actually starts in the fall, where department heads will submit to our budget office their requests for a budget.
Mm-hmm.
And our budget office will then do a lot of analysis about what we estimate we think we'll be able to collect in revenues from a variety of sources.
Mm-hmm.
The main ones are taxes and grants and state revenue.
Okay.
And then our ability to pay for all the services that people really care about. Once that process, it takes a long time to work through. I will review the budget, have some potential changes that I'd like to see happen with our budget office, and there's a
Mm-hmm.
back and forth. And then eventually, as required by the city's charter, I'm supposed to submit to the Board of Alders on March 1st my proposed budget. And then the Board
Okay.
of Alders takes it from there. There's public hearings, and the Alders then in May will approve a final budget. And then the budget will be for our start of our fiscal year, which starts on July 1st.
Okay.
You asked why the state is an important part of this process.
Yeah.
Well, cities like ours and around Connecticut receive a significant amount of funding from the state.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a variety of different buckets of funding that we receive. And it's hugely important to us providing the services that our residents really care about and helping us address a lot of the challenges that we face. Oftentimes, because the state is in the process of finalizing their budget at the same time that we're in the process of finalizing ours,
Mm-hmm.
it can be a little bit difficult because
Yeah.
not exactly sure how much funding we may end up receiving from the state, and that
Mm-hmm.
may be changed. And of course, that impacts us. But state funding is hugely helpful to us being able to provide the services that people care about.
And that's programs like Pilot, especially, are important to our larger cities where there's a lot of, schools and
Yeah,
hospitals and things that are off the tax rolls.
yeah, exactly. So the main buckets of money are pilot payment in lieu of taxes for the property that we can't tax in the city, like
Mm-hmm.
university property, hospital property, church property, and things like that. And then also education funding. And there's an educational cost share formula that the state has to support places that are educating students that may need some additional help.
Yeah.
Students that may be not as comfortable with English, students that may be coming from a background of poverty. And then there's another bucket of money that's much smaller for special education.
Mm-hmm.
And so all the state has a number of different ways of calculating the amount of funds that come to
Yeah.
municipalities, and that's significantly, particularly education funding is a significant part of our education budget.
Yeah. At CCM, we think the state budget is so important for our member towns and cities that we launched a campaign that we're calling Do the Math on behalf of our member municipalities, New Haven included. Can you speak to why the governor should be doing the math on his own budget?
Yeah, and I think that before I dive into that specific question,
Hmm.
I'd first just step back and say we all have the same goal here. We want our cities and towns to thrive,
Yeah.
and we want to have everyone in our living in our cities and towns, especially our children, to have an equal shot at being successful in life. And the reality is, right now, that is just not the case. And I look at my own personal life as an example of this. Where I grew up in
Hmm.
New Canaan, Connecticut, and New Canaan is a wealthy suburb of New York.
Yeah.
And uh, currently, New Canaan spends around 28 and $29,000 per pupil on public schools.
Hmm.
And I'm sure the ratio was similar when I was growing up, probably a lesser amount because of inflation.
Yeah.
But when you compare New Canaan to a New Haven, where we spend around $20,000 per pupil, and our students in New Haven often need a lot more support.
Yeah.
Growing up, I didn't need the kind of help. I wasn't a first generation college goer. My parents
Yeah.
went to college, and so they had that experience, and they could kind of guide me on how to apply for college. I had support for SAT classes that after school that a lot of kids don't have. I didn't have any kind of challenges at home that may have exposed me to trauma, and
Hmm.
I spoke English fluently
Yeah.
from a little when I was a little kid. And in New Haven, kids are dealing with all kinds of additional issues. And so when you compare those two towns, a New Canaan, it's great that they're spending $28,000, $29,000
Yeah.
per child in their schools. But arguably, New Haven should be spending even more than New Canaan is
Yeah.
because our kids need a lot more support. They need a lot more staff in school that can help keep them on track, more guidance counselors, all those things. But unfortunately, the way that our state is structured, it's nearly impossible for cities like New Haven to put that kind of money into our schools.
Yeah.
That's because of a taxation system with our municipalities that is heavily reliant on real estate taxes.
Hmm.
And when you look at a city like New Haven, you have over 50% of our city is non-taxable. So the other 50% of our city, the residents, are
Yeah.
paying 100% of the taxes for the city, whereas in a place like New Canaan, there's very little of the town that is non-taxable. Maybe there's a couple of churches, but we don't in New Canaan we didn't have large universities or we didn't have hospitals, things like
Yeah.
that. So everyone's paying into this shared pool of funding to help fund the services. And then you add on to that New Haven residents often don't have as much money because there's a lot more, the median income's much lower in New Haven. And we have to pay for a lot of services that a place like New Canaan doesn't. We have to
Yeah.
pay for more police officers and other challenging support for individuals experiencing homelessness. And so, just stepping aside from this do the math question, we already live in a state that has extreme inequality in a system that is structured to make it very, very difficult for cities like New Haven to invest in things like our education system when uh, very clearly we should be spending much more than
Yeah.
some of our suburban counterparts in our kids. And so when you do the math,
Hmm.
the state can play a very, very important role in either changing the structure and how we collect revenue so that we're
Yeah.
not so heavily reliant on property tax or making up the difference. And the reality is the state has made promises in the past to make up that difference,
Hmm.
not always really followed through on those promises.
Yeah.
And that's why there's a real strong effort from a lot of municipalities and CCM to call on the governor and the state legislature to do the math and
Hmm.
start to really follow through on their commitments and help undo some of these inequities that exist.
Yeah. I know one thing we always talk about at CCM is the unfunded mandates. And, as a city, there's certain standards and things that you have to provide for your residents by law as set by the state. And I think part of the thing is, if the state's going to set some of these rules, they need to help us pay for some of these things too.
Yeah, exactly. Just as a couple of examples that happened recently, there's the state changed the way that motor vehicle taxes are calculated. And it simplified it,
Mm.
and it's a good thing. But the way that the state did it it actually meant that municipalities had to lose a good percentage of the motor vehicle value in their cities and
Hmm.
towns. And therefore, we had to raise taxes to make up for that difference. And so the state forced us to use a different calculation measure for how we tax motor vehicles that lowered the amount that we could raise, but then the state didn't provide any funding to help
Yeah.
with that. And there's a good number of examples that are like that.
So they lowered it on the car side, but in order to make up that money somewhere, because you had to, it had to go up on the other side, basically.
Yeah, and I think
Yeah.
this is the core of the Do the Math campaign is that, you know, for a long time, the state leadership has been rightfully wanting to address a lot of the challenges that the state has with underfunded pensions and
Hmm.
those liabilities that haven't really been addressed for a long time. But they can't do that off of the backs of cities. And
Yeah.
we've seen in the last 5 years since I've been mayor that the governor has actually cut taxes and from a state perspective,
Hmm.
and at the same time work to try to pay down some of these liabilities. But what people don't often connect is that then municipalities have to raise taxes. We're heavily reliant on
Yeah.
property taxes, and the state hasn't changed the ways of calculating, for example, educational cost share,
Hmm.
the educational subsidies that we get for many years, and those costs continue to rise for us. And so, if the state is not going to increase those costs, municipalities have to bear the burden of those
Yeah.
costs, unfortunately. And so, what we're asking is pretty simple: that you look at the math and say it's not actually accurate that the governor is not raising taxes. It's just that municipal leaders are having to do that
Yeah.
because the state is foisting some of these responsibilities for these costs onto towns and cities.
Yeah. Um, we've been pretty vocal about the state needing to step up on this, but what's critical about now? CCM has been talking about the underfundedness of our municipalities for years on reimbursements. What makes this moment so critical?
We have 119,000 youth that are disconnected throughout the state. And the youth in those categories are in every community throughout the state. There's a significant amount of effort led by CCM to analyze the number of youth, the types of challenges the youth have faced, and also identify ways that we can help support those young people to make sure that they're on track. And
Yeah, that the Young
uh,
People First report that we worked on as part of the 119K thing,
exactly,
studied and talked to people, worked with the Boston Consulting Group, and
yeah,
came out with this. Yeah,
exactly. And so that outlines something that I think a lot of people already knew and had been seeing in recent years that there's a lot of young people that are really struggling right now.
yeah,
And it's an important the reason that we need to help support the young people. Number one, it's the right thing to do, right? We want our
mhm,
young people to be on track. We owe them, I believe, the opportunity to become productive
yeah,
citizens. But number two, it's in our own best interests, all of our state's best interests, our state's financial interests. We want to be ensuring young people are able to be on a pathway to own a home, to own a car, to pay taxes on that home and then tax on
yeah,
that car,
exactly.
to have a solid income so that they can pay taxes on that solid income. We want our young people to have families and be productive community members. That's a good thing, not only for the young people, but it's also a good thing for our society.
Yeah.
We don't want our young people to uh, have to rely on a lot of government support. We don't want our young people to have to go to prison
Yeah.
and
Which
interact with
end
the
up
justice
costing
system
money. Yeah. And
because
so
there's a
it's like
huge
it's an
cost to
investment
that.
in everybody's future, really,
Exactly. And
even if you
so
don't have kids in the system.
it makes all the sense in the world for many reasons for us to address this problem head on. And that is, I think, because of this report, because there's a real statewide conversation right now on addressing the challenges around disconnected youth, there's more
Mhm.
energy than I have ever seen behind this initiative to ensure that we really change the dynamic around state funding. And this 119K Commission report, among a lot of different solid recommendations, included a proposed change to the state's educational subsidy, which, effectively hasn't changed in over 10 years.
Yeah.
The educational cost share formula has a foundation amount that has not gone up since 2013. And
Hmm.
what other costs have not gone up since 2013? It's everything from eggs to your car to your utility bill. Everything has gone up, and that's the same for our schools, right?
Yeah.
The schools are paying for all these costs that have gone up. Yet the state's estimate of how much it costs to educate an average child has not changed at all in their
Yeah.
calculation for those subsidies. And so this proposal will actually have a deeply meaningful change in the way that we help support our kids. Now's the
Yeah.
time.
You are listening to the Municipal Voice on WNHH 103.5 FM. One of the things we've been talking about with the governor's budget, when we're looking at it, is that he said he increased it, but the Boston Consulting Group says that the state has reduced its proportional share by over 400 million real dollars. What does that mean? Can you talk about the role of inflation and some of those factors that go into this stat from the city's point of view?
Yeah, so it means a couple things. So either all costs are going up, and any person that goes to the grocery store regularly can see that, right?
Mhm.
And if the state doesn't increase its costs, increase the grants that it provides to the cities and towns, our costs still go up. So someone either has to pay that difference or we have to make cuts. And the reality is, at least for New Haven, we have paid that difference. And that's a struggle for us
Yeah.
because it is a huge increase in our budget. In the past 5 years, the city of New Haven's increased our educational share, or our share of our educational budget, by over 50%. So we have dramatically increased what we're paying into the educational system annually to make up for these increasing costs.
Hmm.
And still, we have 46 school counselors for 19,000 students. Just to give you an idea of what that is, we have one counselor for 412 students.
Wow.
One guidance counselor couldn't possibly help out that many students. They may get an appointment a year, but
Yeah.
with our students who need a lot more support. We have 53 social workers for 19,000 students. So that's one social worker per 358 students. That's a crazy number.
Yeah.
We need to have many more staff that are supporting our kids so that they can actually have the supports that they need to thrive.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, when we see the state holding flat its funding, it's actually effectively a cut
Yeah.
because municipalities have to make up the difference and pay more because of the costs going up over time. And our students, if municipalities can't keep up with that, are going to suffer.
Yeah. Um, So a lot of these numbers we've been throwing around were based on independent analysis that was done during the 119K Commission, which you served on. And you wrote an op-ed, which was co-signed by 51 other municipal CEOs, urging the state to do more based on the work of that commission. In that op-ed, it plainly asserts that the need for an over $500 million investment in education over a certain span of years. What is the expectation versus reality on getting that kind of investment from the state?
I think it's about how many people uh, voice their belief that our kids deserve an equal opportunity at an education and an equal shot at being successful in life. I think there's a strong possibility. I know that our legislators, in a bipartisan manner, by the way,
Yeah.
really support doing a lot more for our kids. And oftentimes at the state legislature, particularly at this time where the legislative season is full speed ahead, is all about what takes the highest priority. And the more that our legislators and the governor hear from people that they care about our kids' future and they want to invest in our kids because it's an investment in the future of our state, the more likely it is that we're going to come close to that number, which is a number that will provide our children in New Haven and in Waterbury and Stamford and Bridgeport and in a lot of our small towns, which, by the way, many serve struggling students as well. The true opportunity, the staffing levels that the kids need so that our kids can really thrive.
Yeah. And I think, our kids thriving in the cities and in the small towns is ultimately the justification for such a large ask.
Yeah, it's plain as day, and there's examples that I think everyone has experienced, and that's everything from kids that may be off track and stealing cars
Yeah.
to young people that just need that extra person that in the school that feels confident in them so that they'll apply for that job
Just that
or
little push sometimes.
yeah,
Yeah.
a little push. Everyone it knows a lot of people from their own personal experience growing up just how important that school environment is to them. And I think inherently people understand just how much school, because children spend so much
Yeah.
time in school, has an impact on a person's trajectory going forward. So
Yeah.
I believe that across our state, people um, feel strongly about this.
Hmm.
It's about our legislators needing to hear from people
Yeah.
about how important this is. And that's why, it takes a little step to write an email or send a text or call your legislature, but that's why that's so important for them to hear from their constituents.
Yeah. Talking about that, at least one legislator has heard about it because we have one bill, SB 1511, an act concerning disconnected youth. You, as well as some other representatives from New Haven Public Schools and some students went up to Hartford to the Capitol to testify about this bill. Um, First question, why did you think it was important to have the kids there?
So what's great about this is the kids felt it was important,
Okay,
and
so it
not
came
that I
came
felt
from
it
them.
important.
Okay.
Trust me, I felt that it was important too because I think hearing from the young people who are directly impacted by this is key for lawmakers. But what was so inspiring about this is the young people organized this, and as someone that's tried to organize people to testify and such, it is not easy to do. I took the train up with them from New
Hmm.
Haven to Hartford, and I showed up at the train station and I was there just to support them, thinking maybe they'll get 10 young people that
Yeah.
will go on the train. And kid after kid after kid kept arriving. It was
Yeah,
really
there's a whole
inspiring. We had
crew. It
over
was it was
80,
impressive.
80,
Yeah.
80 kids going up to the Capitol on the train for in many cases, their first real civic experience. And to see the kind of energy, the thought that they put into their testimony, the young people were nervous because
Hmm.
it's
It's
a
intimidating.
intimidating
Yeah.
environment, but they did it because they care about their schools and they care about their education. And they wanted to do the right thing for not just them, but their classmates. It was really inspiring.
Yeah. And I think, would you be happy to see this bill get passed?
Yeah, yeah, I
Yeah.
testified for it. And I think more importantly, there were 80 kids up there that were testifying for it in their first experience with the civic world. It would be so disheartening if this bill didn't move forward and get accepted by the legislature for a lot of the young people that really, believe in the system and believe
Yeah.
that they have an ability to impact the lives of so many of their classmates.
Yeah. And talking about the impact, I think, kind of my last question to wrap it up is if there's people listening out there, that you've convinced at this point need more done for our towns, more education funding, what can they do to help us in this fight?
I think the main thing is to talk to your legislators and reach out to the governor's office because as someone that I run New Haven
Hmm.
and in my seat, if I hear from a lot of people about something that they care about, I'll pay more attention to it, right?
Yeah.
We are in these roles to serve our community. And similarly, the governor and our state legislators, if they hear more from people about a certain issue, they'll pay more attention to it. And so it's actually not that hard to write an email or make a phone call. And our legislators and governor receive them all the time. So I think for some people it can be a little bit intimidating the
Hmm.
first time around, but
But not
And
everyone has to go to the Capitol to testify the first time around. They can email their legislators. They can
exactly.
little things help as well.
Exactly. And legislators and the governor, I think, welcome the feedback because they want to hear from people. That's part of why we've all run for these positions
Gotten into
because
this line
we
of
want to
work. Yeah.
serve the public.
Awesome. Well, Mayor Elicker, thanks for talking with us today. It's always nice to have you on the show, and keep up the good work.
Thanks for having me on. It was a lot of fun.
We'd like to thank our guest, Mayor Justin Elicker. The Municipal Voice is a co-production by CCM and WNHH 103.5 FM. Joe Thornton is our executive producer, Christopher Gilson is our producer, Harry Draws is on the boards, and I'm Matt Ford, your host. Be sure to check out our Facebook page and give us a like, and watch out for our CCM chat series on our YouTube page.